Surviving the kitchen sink. I cannot and will not make a roll of morcon as good as my mother does, nor simmer soothingly a pot of mechado as lip-smacking as my husband does. But I can thoroughly wash tomatoes whose bottoms are as round as the half moons of my toes. Diced red apples as crisp as Baguio weather in December. Sliced bell peppers as green as the sheen of leaves after a rainfall. With a slightly steady hand, I can paint stones, pebbles, the lips of broken jars, but I cannot arrange them into an artful still life, for the landscaping skills I do not possess. Through a game of evasion, I have survived the sorrows of the kitchen sink. Let me not name them. Let me instead paint with this unsteady hand the contours of the vegetable basket's contents. For here, with my acquired vocabulary of acrylics, I have found a pocket of peace. Discovered the strategies of strawberries, tasted the temperance of tomatoes, empathized with one's chaste chayotes, now plucked from the vine and lain on a bulging pillow of bell peppers.
Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Ngayon po ay papagtuloy po natin yung ating episode on coping with grief and depression. Dalawa pong malaking event sa ating buhay bilang mga Kristiyano at bilang isang ang dalawang sakuna na po na-experience natin recently. Ito po yung, hindi lang yung po yung COVID and all that implies for our everyday lives, as well as yung na mga series po ng mga bagyo which has overcome our people, na mukhang stretch na po tayo. And we are nearing yung depletion ng ating mga coping mechanisms, as well as yung nasabi na resilience. Medyo bumababa na rin po ito. And it is a good thing that we are doing itong episode na ito, coping with grief and depression. Pero po tayong dalawang mahalagang guests para dito. Si Babeth po na batikang manunulat at she also writes poetry, and also si Babeth Mendoza who is a community psychologist. So, welcome po sa inyo sa episode na ito. And Marie will introduce si Miss Babeth Lolarga more formally. So, Marie?
Yes, maraming salamat, Ate Melba. I want to introduce our guest, pero gusto ko lang din talagang i-share kasi itong ating ISIP-ISAK ay community naman natin at mga kaibigan natin. Alam niyo po, mamaya magkikwento din ang Ate Melba sa atin. Kasi kung kayo ay naka-follow sa ISAK page, alam niyo na ang ating Ate Melba talaga ay strong, independent woman dahil isa siyang survivor din ngayong Ulysses. But before we go to that, let's acknowledge yung mga kasama natin ngayong gabi. Alam niyo po, I'm so excited because we have a very special guest. Siya ay isang manunulat, isa din siyang visual artist, at katulad nung narinig ninyo kanina bago tayo mag-opening billboard, ay siya po ay magaling din sumulat ng tula. At mamaya may paparinig siya sa atin na tula pa na isinaling niya sa ating wikang Tagalog. I'm speaking about our friend from Baguio City, Miss Babeth Lolarga. Magandang gabi po, Miss Babeth. Gusto niyo po bang bumati sa ating friends?
Good evening sa lahat at salamat sa pakikinig at panonood ng ISIP-ISAK. Special shout out to my church cafe, yung Bible study group ko, at saka yung another prayer group, the Paulinians, batch 73. Thank you.
Ayan. Thank you, Miss Babeth. At shout out nga naman sa ating mga kasama sa Church Cafe. Sila Ate Fe, mga has, at kasama niya dyan sila Doc Mick, sila Doc Mary Miklat na naging guest na natin, at sila, naging professor ko to, si Professor Sunil Stephen. So magandang gabi sa inyo if you're watching. At meron pa tayong isang guest, Kuya Jail. Nagbabalik ang ating isa sa mga paborito nating kasama. She is a community psychologist, and she's a consultant and a coach, on leadership, and of course she's a life coach, as I've mentioned. Walang iba yan kundi ang ating minamahal na si Ate Boots. Magandang gabi, Ate Boots. Bati ka muna.
Sige, magandang gabi sa ating lahat. Pagpapala mula sa Panginoon at masaya ako na nagbabalik at may bagong kasama. So looking forward to a very nice discussion tonight. Maraming salamat po.
Ate Boots at saka
Yes.
si Babeth, yan ang ating kasama ngayong gabi. Mga kapatid, mga kasama dito sa ISIP-ISAK. Marie, ang ating pag-uusapan sa gabing ito ay, syempre gusto natin na maging light-hearted yung ating conversation, pero hindi naman natin din maikakaila na medyo mabigat yung ating pag-uusapan ngayon. We're going to talk about, brothers and sisters, how we cope with grief and depression. There's so much grief, there's so much depression sa panahon natin ngayon, hindi ba, Marie? I remember at the start of the ECQ, yung mga articles na isinulat ko for Rappler ay tungkol na agad sa grief and depression, challenging the faith community, na instead na i-deny natin yung nangyayari by just simulating yung church services tapos gagawin nating online. Let's really confront the reality of pain and depression and suffering na bunga, of course, ng pinagdadaanan ng maraming mga Pilipino. And look at where we are right now, months down the road. Ito pa rin tayo, grief, suffering, and not just because of the pandemic, but obviously because of yung pagsunod-sunod ng mga sakuna. The most recent of which was
That's
Ulysses.
true. Oo nga. Tama. And if I may just take a step back, as a nation, parang sunod-sunod yung sapak sa atin. Parang it's as if we're just trying to get up. Pero ito na naman, ang isang malakas na suntok. We were in a meeting a while ago with CCT. So shout out din sa mga taga-Community Center for Transformation, Center for Community Transformation. Kila Ate Ruth, salamat sa inyo kanina, and I hope you're watching us. Pinag-usapan namin, sabi namin, Jail, December pa lang, lumindol na sa Mindanao. Diba? At after ng lindol, dumating naman yung pandemic. After ng pandemic, di naman talaga tayo nakapagpahinga. Dumating na naman tong mga bagyo, si Quinta, si Rolly, at syempre yung mabagsik na si Ulysses. So parang chronic stress, nabanggit natin yan last week. At hindi lang yung mga tinatamaan ng mga ganitong pagsubok yung stress. Alam mo, pati yung mga tumutulong, pati yung mga faith-based organizations, taga-NGOs, mga taga-simbahan, ay may fatigue na din. Kaya sa tingin ko, saktong-sakto talaga itong usapan natin ngayong gabi.
Yes. Simulan na natin. So ang ating unang magsasalita ay si Ma'am Babeth Lolarga. Si Ma'am Babeth is will talk to us, will narrate to us yung mga naging experiences niya with anxiety and depression. Tapos bilang isang artist, yung experience ng pandemic. She will talk about art as therapy, sharing her paintings and poetry. Ma'am Babeth, take it away.
Okay. Two confessions. I was first diagnosed as a depressive in my high school years. I went through my parents brought me from one psychologist to another to find out why my grades were dropping, and I was becoming isolated and uncommunicative, and I couldn't sleep weeks in a row. But they didn't, although my father was a physician, he didn't think of taking me to his psychiatrist friends. They brought me to the family, meaning my cousins and aunts who were psychologists. And their analysis was nothing really wrong with me, that a little rest and good nutrition could help. So, ang unang analysis was just a depressive or melancholy personality. But in college, uh, lumabas na yung manic side, yung doing many things at the same time, uh, being part of many activities in school apart from academic work, and then the urge to excel. I was pushing myself hard because I was the eldest in the family. I wanted to finish college in less than 4 years so I could help my parents. That was my main driving force. But I couldn't take it, so I had a breakdown. And this time, my father took me to a psychiatrist, and I was put on a regimen of medication that would enable me to be calm and to have a full night's sleep. Uh, I I was able to. By then, I was already writing poetry. And what my friend Nieves Epistola, one of the legendary English professors in the Department of English and Comparative Literature, did was for me to go to her faculty center office for weekly workshops. We would discuss my poems. I would rewrite them when I got home, and she would look for outlets for them. So that encouraged me a lot. Uh, Fast forward, uh, I was working as a journalist, and that can be, how do you call it? Uh, Very taxing on one's physical and mental health because araw-araw ang dyaryo eh. Hindi naman nagde-day off except maski na Pasko may issue pa rin, New Year's, ganon. Holy Week noon meron pang issue. It's only in the recent years when you don't have issues on Holy Thursday and Good Friday. But during my time, we worked even on Good Friday. So that wore me out. And when I felt that exhaustion, I thought it was time to take a break from or quit journalism and try something else. So in 2004, I enrolled for a second degree in fine arts in my alma mater, UP Diliman. And I continued studying the course at UP Baguio. Some friends said, "Why do you have to go through all the process of studying for plates, submitting plates, taking subjects in art history, etc., when you can just go to an art tutor and you can shortcut your way through painting? It will be faster." But I wanted to challenge myself. I think that's the manic side of me. So I was able to finish my second degree in fine arts and interact with a generation younger than me. They were old enough to be my nieces, nephews, and children. And I noticed, because they were taking subjects that I didn't need to take anymore, their anxiety for even subjects like PE, some of them would fail PE, physical education. And they would say things like, "Hay nako, ang sarap maglaslas." Meaning cut their
Wrist.
wrist,
Yes.
the blade. Fine art student kami, we always carried around blades in our backpacks because we needed them for cutting paper, for shaping paper, and the like. Uh, so So since I've been diagnosed as bipolar, manic depressive, I've studied my disease, and then I've been under the care of a psychiatrist since uh, I cannot remember anymore, for much of my adult life and under medication. But I'm a high functioning bipolar, meaning I'm able to meet deadlines, I'm able to write, I'm able to participate in the community. I'm part of the Baguio Writers Group, and every now and then we would stage poetry readings. Now that the pandemic has gotten rid of live poetry gigs, we do it live on Zoom in partnership with Mount Cloud. So, and I'm a wife to my husband. I like to think of myself as a supportive one, and I'm also a full-time now, because of the pandemic, mother and grandmother. My my main responsibilities at home are to do the laundry and to cook one dish meals so that we can have them for lunch. Then the leftovers are reheated for dinner. So yan ang buhay ko. And then, how does mania manifest itself in my everyday life? For example, like this, in a Zoom, when there is a lag in the discussion, I open a tab, and I read other links to keep my mind busy. My psychiatrist likes to say those are red flag indicators when you have too many tabs on your computer open. But I like to keep my mind busy. But sometimes you mustn't believe your mind all the time. That's what I found out. You must listen to your may visual aid ako. You must also listen to your heart.
Heart.
Oo.
Yes.
So that's the cue for me. When I feel exhausted mentally, I do my scrapbooking, old-fashioned scrapbooking, yung mga drawings ng anak ko, ng apo ko. I cut them out, shape them, outline them, and then paste them in my diary. Then apart from the online writing for Vera Files or for the Inquirer, where I use the computer keyboard, I still handwrite letters and handwrite in my journal using fountain pens given to me by a dear friend. Uh, this is how my journal looks like. I doodle in it. I do cutouts. And then I open Pinterest to look for drawings na I can copy so I don't lose my touch. And then another helpful thing, I wonder if book is still available in National Bookstore, because it's an Anvil book. It's called Down to One, Depression Stories by Margarita Holmes. She interviewed extensively and exhaustively 10 individuals, and I'm included among them. The 10 include fashion designer, si Patis Tesoro, banker, fellow journalists like Alia Honasan. We all came out with our stories. We shared our stories to the public, down to one, depression stories, in hopes that this would help people who feel stigmatized that they have this so-called disease, when actually it's nakakaya naman with faith, with supportive groups. with families that don't condemn you. Because in the beginning, my mother was, hindi sa aming side yan ang galing. Marupok siguro yung mga Lolarga, kaya ganyan ka. Yung kailangan mo manalangin pa. Kumisan, she would tell me those things and I would get hurt further and it would make me feel isolated in my pain. What else? Kayo naman na magtanong.
Yes, actually, Miss
The
Babeth,
viewers are also welcome to ask questions.
ask a question. Speaking of viewers, may gusto pong bumati sa inyo. Si Liana. She said,
yeah.
hello, Tita Bean.
It's reminded
Hello, Liana. Thank you for being with us.
Now that
Yes, po.
Liana Garceliano said hello, I'm reminded of her father, the poet Edel Garceliano. He passed away in the first quarter of the year, in the midst of the lockdown. And it was a difficult time for me because I couldn't openly grieve.
Yeah.
Grieving is one of the two topics here, grief and depression. The lockdown was hard on people like me because I lost a lot of friends, 5 of them in a span of 6 months, one after the other. And I couldn't go to a wake to express condolences with the surviving relatives. What I did to ease the pain a bit was to write or talk about them either with my husband or write a Facebook note about the recently deceased. This helped trigger other memories from my other Facebook friends. And parang nasa wake na rin kami, nasa burol, consoling one another. The one of Adele was the first in this year, and it was terrible. His widow and I were sobbing on the phone, and we couldn't hug each other. She's very close to me.
We understand that. Totoo po yan. Go ahead po.
And then another thing, if you have this ailment that I have, it is a good thing to be to be part of volunteer work. Even some kind of social activists through the net. That's one form of getting out of your shell, stepping out of your shaky ego or whatever it is, and find that some people are harder up than you.
Wow.
Oh.
Ma'am Babeth, before we move to Ate Boots, I just wanted to ask you, does it get better over time?
This is the thing with my condition. It comes in cycles. Hindi mo malalaman when it's gonna hit you again. And the cycles can last for as short as 2 weeks to 2 years. In between you're functioning, you're still kind of functioning. You manage to smile bravely. But you know you're hurting inside. There's a void inside. There's a Alia Honasan compared it to a hollow block. You wake up with this hollow block on your chest. You hate the sight of daylight because you didn't get a good night's sleep. It can go on, and then the medication helps. I'm grateful for that. And then my therapeutic little activities also, nalilibang ako dahil dito. It doesn't get better with time. Otherwise, somebody like Anthony Bourdain would still be with us, or Sylvia Plath, or Anne Sexton.
Right.
Even
Spade.
Oh.
Yes. All these great people. Well, let me just say po, before we forget, no, kami ni Jail, we were chatting back and forth how much we admire you and how much we are grateful that you are telling your story. I think this is the first step, not this brave thing of saying how vulnerable you are. Kasi marami tayong viewers, I'm sure, and even I myself can resonate with the human pain that you are sharing. Na there are just days that it's not what they say na you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hindi. Talagang there are things that really, weigh you down and sometimes you can't explain. And as a pastor, I always would hear the elders say na, ang buti nga ng Diyos, dapat magpasalamat ka. But, you cannot deny the fact that, yes, you know that God is good, but your heart is heavy. And so we thank you for sharing, Miss Babeth, and really opening the space. And I hope that our viewers will see that there's no shame in saying that, hey, I'm going through this. I also wonder, aside from natanong natin yan ni Jay, does it get better with time? Ang tanong ko naman din is, how does art help you? What feeling does it give you when when you begin to hold your brush or when you begin to type down the words or write down the words on your phone? Ano yung feeling that comes on to you that makes it lighter, I suppose?
The thing with being a writer, I think Manang Melba knows this, is you're writing all the time. Even as you cook or chop the onions or pound the garlic, you're still thinking of what's gonna be my lead for my new feature article. That's at the back of your mind. That's why I turned to the visual art, so it would quiet that mind. And I would just be concentrating on the brush strokes, the color, mixing the colors, the shapes. It's a relief from working with words all the time. On the other hand, I cannot give up writing because that was what I was trained to do and that is what I love. And I don't feel complete when I'm not writing. But when my mind is exhausted, my doctor friend told me, you're 65, you allow yourself days off naman, even weeks off. And that's when nagmamarathon ako ng Netflix, ng The Crown, among others, A Suitable Boy. I watch those shows para namang mabalance. I think balance is key.
I agree. Balance is key. Thank you, Ma'am Babeth. We're gonna listen now to Ate Boots. We're gonna bring her in, and we're gonna listen to her as a psychologist and how can we journey? Now that's the question. How do we journey with people who go through grief and depression these days? Ate Boots, baka pwede nyo na rin in your presentation, in your brief talk, masagot yung tanong ni Tim. Sabi ni Tim, kailan ba when do we propose that the person sees a mental health professional na? Oo, lalo na this is quite an unusual concept, lalo na sa mga mahihirap, sa mga urban poor. I'm sure Tim knows a lot about this because of his ministry, but that's one of the hanging questions that we have there. Sige po, Ate Boots, take it away. And then we'll come back for the open forum.
Sige. Again, magandang gabi sa lahat. No, I'm listening to Miss Babeth, and I am really thankful for her story and bearing herself to all of us. No, and sabi mo nga, Jail, how do we journey with someone who's going through depression or grief? When you journey with someone, you walk with them side by side, not ahead of them, not behind them, but with them, no? And I think yun yung isang concept na importante, na alam nung tao who's going through grief or depression, na meron siyang kasama. The worst that could happen, katulad din ng sabi ni Miss Babeth, and when you start feeling isolated, when you have been isolated, you have been ostracized, you have been judged, at walang acceptance, mabigat yon. You go through the grief and then feel mo, ina-isolate ka pa, mas mabigat yon. So, I think what many of us could do, whether ikaw ay kaibigan, ikaw ay magulang, o ikaw ay pastor, o even a professional, to just to be there, just to make the person know that you're present. Yun yung whole concept of presence, at hindi madaling gawin yon, pero yun ay ang kinakailangan. And the least that we should be doing is to judge the person, but only to accept what the person is going through. In fact, in many, lalo na kapag itong panahon na ito of na meron tayong, may pandemic na, merong calamity or disaster, you just have to be there to listen. Yun ang pinaka-importanting skill ng isang tumutulong, makinig. But when you listen, you don't have to force the person to talk. You could just be there. Kung ready na siyang magsalita, then makinig ka. Kung ayaw pa niya magsalita, wag mong puwersahin magsalita. Take the cue from the person kung kailan siya ready magsalita. In the case of our guest, no, maganda dahil sabi nga niya, bagamat she's a writer, even from there she has to take rest from that and find other ways of that would relax her, no. Ganon din siguro lahat ng tao, yung ating mga ginagawa, yung ating mga profession, is importante yun sa atin kasi yun ay expression ng ating pagkatao. Kung iyon man ay nagkukos sa atin ng anxiety or pressure, it doesn't mean na tanggalin mo sa kanila yun. Kasi kung minsan may tendency tayo na, yung bang pagiging writer mo o yung bang pagiging professor mo o yung pagiging nagbibigay sa'yo ng anxiety, then remove all of those from you. Napakadaling sabihin yon, pero katulad nga ng sabi ni Miss Babeth, buhay niya ang pagsusulat, no? So, kung ano man yung profession na meron ka, parte yun ng pagkatao mo, parte yun ng buhay mo, and you don't just throw that away because it is causing you anxiety or stress, no? But perhaps what is needed, as what is happening now, take a rest from it. Dapat ikaw yung may control over the situation and you can rest from it, find something else to do that relaxes the mind, and once you're okay, then you can always go back to who you are, to what you're doing, kahit pa na nagbibigay ng stress or anxiety yung mga bagay na yon. So napaka-importanting tingnan na kung tumutulong tayo, we don't impose ourselves on other people. Ang pagtulong ay hindi paraan na kaya mo ginagawa ay kasi gusto mong ipakita na magaling ka. It's not about you. It's about the other person na nangangailangan ng tulong. So tayo, umaalalay lang, nandyan lang para sa kanila kung kailan nila kailangan ng tulong. Naman sa tanong ni Tim, kailan ba dapat mag-seek ng professional help? Alam mo, kuminsan the person himself, no, kung halimbawa yung kliyente niya o yung tinutulungan niya, siya mismo magsasabi na palagay ko kailangan ko na ng kausap o kailangan ko na someone na tutulong sa akin. Again, always take your cue from the person experiencing it. Because kahit na katulad ko, I'm a psychologist, I would never dare to say to another person na alam ko ang pinagdadaanan mo kasi hindi ko alam. 'Di ba? Hindi ko talaga alam kung anong pinagdadaanan niya, pero kung makikinig ako sa kanya, maaari kong maintindihan kung anong pinagdadaanan niya, but I will never have a full knowledge of what the person is going through, and I should never claim that. Otherwise, nadi-depersonalize ko siya. Otherwise, parang may tendency ako na minimenos ko kung sino siya bilang isang tao, no? So, yun yung, at this point, yun yung masasabi ko. At yung sinasabi rin ni Miss Babeth, yung looking for activism, something to do, that is also common, na lalo na kapag nag-worry ka na o nagda-doubt ka na sa worth mo as an individual, you really try to look for something that is worthwhile to give meaning sa iyong existence, no? Para alam mo, it's worth doing this, it's worth doing the fight, it's worth keep going, because there's this particular part of me which is activism, whether it's activism about children, about the environment, it could be even a political activism. It would give you meaning to your existence, and so just let it flow, let it happen to you. Okay, so yun yung aking
Yes.
share.
Ate Boots, I have a follow-up question, ha?
Sige
Pero
po.
before that, I just want to acknowledge our viewers. Sabi ni Liana, Ate Babeth, the crying never stops. Liana, our heart goes out to you. I also lost my dad, so I know how it feels na mawalan ng tatay. Sabi naman ni Rachel Perete, who's also an artist, sabi niya, it's one of my outlet din po, yung pagdo-drawing. Sometimes I write things sa journal kasi it really helps. Salamat daw po for sharing. And from one of my favorite ISIP-ISAK guests, Ma'am Alma Cruz Miklat. Sabi po niya sa inyo, Miss Babeth, you're so brave, and hugs daw po. Ayan. So, Ate Boots, balik ako sa'yo. You mentioned again, this thing, it surfaced again last time, yung listening. And I said about how we're so good in the church, even in the Christian community na tayo dapat yung kasama nilang journey. We're so good to speak to them, but not really to listen to them. Sabi ni Lori Gottlieb, siya sa magagaling na psychotherapist, and she has this New York Times na best-selling book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, and it's 10 months on the New York Times bestseller list. Sabi niya, we need to speak to them so that their inner voice will come out. Kaya lang what happens daw sometimes when we speak to them, we suppress their inner voice kasi hindi talaga tayo nakikinig. So, siguro ang tanong ko, Ate Boots, ano ba yung mga practical na pwede namin gawin tayo? Pwede nating practicein, or pwede nating parang ito yung mga signposts na talagang nakikinig ka, at ito yung mga signposts na hindi ka nakikinig. So, kasi sometimes you feel like if people are speaking and then we give advice or solution sa problema nila, ang galing kong makinig, nagbigay ako ng solution. Pero I don't think that's how listening is, di ba? What do you have to share with this as somebody who always listens to you?
Sa palagay ko, one thing that's very important, dapat you must learn to be, to relax yourself when it comes to silence. Kasi kung minsan may mga tao, parang hindi sila komportable kapag tahimik. Gusto nila lagi maingay. Gusto nila lagi may nagsasalita. And if you want to be a good listener, the first thing that you should be able to do is, unang-una, to know how to listen to yourself, what you're saying and what you are not saying. Napaka-importante yon, kasi marami sa mga sinasabi ng tao are not necessarily verbal. Maaring yung tono ng boses, yung kanilang facial expression, those are still communication na kailangan alam nating tingnan. So when we are listening, unang-una, what would help you to develop the skill of listening? Quiet yourself, mag-meditate ka, tingnan mo kung paano ka nag-iisip, paano ka nagsasalita inside, kung paano nagsasalita ang iyong isip. You start with that kasi silent yun silent listening, no? So you have to be comfortable first with silence in order to be able to listen well. Kasi kung ikaw yung tao na ikaw mismo ay nararatel o you feel anxious, yung bang takot mo na, bakit ba tong kliyente ko o bakit ba tong counseling ko hindi nagsasalita, may tendency ka, either you finish the sentence of your client or you jump in. Halimbawa, merong pause yung iyong kliyente, tendency mo, pinifeel mo yung void, yung ano. Sometimes you have to realize yung silence, importante yon para dun sa iyong kina-counseling. Hindi yon para sa iyo, para yun sa tinutulungan mo. Malay mo yung pag-pause niya, yun ay part of the person's process of thinking or observing himself or understanding ano ba yung sinabi ko. Kung minsan some of them they're also analyzing kung ano yung sinabi nila, no? Yeah.
Thank you. Ang ganda niyan. Be comfortable in silence. Kuya Jail, anything that you would like to share? Parang pregnant na yung silence mo.
No, pinaprocess ko, so I'm taking down notes, to be honest.
Yes, wow.
Kasi, tayo mga educators, and some of us here are educators, we love to talk, di ba? And we're not comfortable in silence. So pag tahimik yung klase, parang may mali. And I think we bring that with us dun sa mga conversations, no, even everyday conversations. No,
Yeah.
Ate Boots, no, bago natin simulan yung ating open forum, may isang tanong lang si Liana Garciliano. Sabi niya, do you just wallow in grief and depression and wait for them to disappear? Will time heal? Yan, siguro baka doon nang gagaling. Minsan naririnig natin yung ganong mga kasabihan. Or do you force yourself to get out of the abyss of grief and depression?
Mm. Meron po ata nagtataas ng kamay si Miss Babeth.
Miss
Yeah.
Babeth.
You first.
Yes, yes.
You first. Kamu na.
Okay, okay.
Sige po. Mahirap kasi there's no one advice fits all eh. There's mahirap sabihin na because you're going through that feeling, you have to get out of it, o mahirap 'yon na ibigay as a prescription, 'di ba? Lalo na if you're in a public situation like this. Kasi what could work for someone may not work for another person. People are just so distinct, are so unique that how they will cope would really depend on how they feel about themselves and how much support they have sa kanilang paligid, no? Of course, as an individual, you would want to be as high functioning as you can be. So kasi pwede ka namang katulad nga ng sabi ni Miss Babeth, you could have bipolar. I have cousin na bipolar din, and she's also an artist, and very functional siya. There's this person, I don't know, Miss Babeth, if you know her, January Turla. She has been going through a lot of therapy, and because she's an artist, what is she doing now? Yung well-known psychological test, yung Rorschach paint ink blot, she has turned them into her art pieces. So it's something that the person himself would have to process. And what professionals like us do is to help the person go through that and discover ano yung kailangan niyang proseso, ano yung healing niya na gagawin, no? So, medication can help, but it will never cure the depression. It will only give you either temporary relief, it can make you sleep so that you don't get tired. Yun ang nagagawa ng medicine, but it will never take away from you yung sitwasyon na yun. Yeah.
I was about to say, you can transform your grief or depression. You can make, as Arthur Miller said, make your pain sing. So yung periods of darkness in your life, they are actually very instructive. Yung dark nights of the soul, you will just cling on to your faith that you will wake up with little shafts of light. Sometimes yung mga nakakatulong din yung medication. Yung paggising mo, meron ng glimmers of hope, sabi nga ng cliche.
Yeah.
As for meditation and being quiet, I got to appreciate the pandemic lockdown because it forced me to be the family cook. We used to order out a lot for delivery or for takeout, but that's quite expensive. I found meditative moments in slicing the onions, as I said earlier, pounding the garlic, peeling the garlic, peeling the chayote, and sometimes turning it into a poem. I cherish those moments or even just taking a shower, a long hot shower, crying your eyes out in the shower, or singing heart out in the shower. Those things can relieve you. Don't force yourself to get out of the abyss of grief and depression kasi unti-unti yan eh.
Mm.
You have to be gentle with yourself. That's what I can share. And then it helps that my husband built a library. We both love books, and this is our sanctum sanctorum.
Mm.
When we need advice from the wise, we turn to books.
Mm.
Yun.
Wow.
I need to step in here, if I may, Ma'am Babeth, Ma'am Woods. Meron kasi tayong stereotypes sa Philippines na because of our unequal society, if you're rich, if you are middle class, and you have this mental illness, then you go to a psychiatrist, you go to a counselor. But if you're urban poor, rural poor, you gotta deal with it. Grit.
That's why we have somebody like Senator Risa Ontiveros fighting for the Mental Health Act and making sure that mental health is taught as early as grade school and that there be no bullying of people who are different from us. I think it starts when you're young. Yung mga public schools, may counselors naman sila sa school eh. It's just that like in St. Paul, Quezon City, where I had my elementary and high school, the guidance counselors were the formidable type. Ang tawag namin sa kanila, Tigers of Malaya. Kasi fierce looking sila, hindi soft and gentle like Boots Mendoza here, who looks very approachable.
Wow.
So, when the school or the DepEd hires the counselors, I think they should be very discerning naman on who they choose or hire.
Right.
And then, would help if the Mental Health Act is in already, I'm not sure, na mental ailment can be also covered by PhilHealth. But
Yes.
not, and that, kasi ang part of the stigmatizing of mental ailment was sabihin nila, ay, ate lang yan, kulang sa pansin, mga ganun ang sinasabi. Pag mag-suicide attempt, sabihin, ay, kinulang sa pansin, mga ganun.
Yeah.
Ate Woods.
Yes. Malakas talaga yung stigma. Alam mo, like, katulad nga ng sabi ni Miss Babeth, no, you're going through so much, tapos makakakita ka pa, makakarinig ka pa ng stigma na nanggagaling sa community. And that is why I agree with her, no, with the Mental Health Act or law. Importante na sa grade school pa lang nababago at nare-reshape na yung pag-iisip ng mga bata, how to respond to people who are going through something, no? Hindi naman lahat ng may problema automatic may mental illness. All of us at certain point in our lives, magkakaroon tayo ng periods of difficulty, whether adjustment problem yan o kaya because of a reaction to yung post-traumatic stress, no, disorder na tinatawag, yung may mamamatay sa pamilya, may ganyan din, merong disaster. Sometimes our way of coping I would it would give us some as if we are going through a lot of meron tayong mental illness, when in fact it is only temporary, no, and that is our way of coping, no. So yung stigma talaga matindi yon at dapat yon na-address talaga. Oo. Kasi sometimes sa community yun yung malaking issue eh. In fact, there's a Bible story that really struck in my mind, no, wherein merong, maybe you remember this, I think it is in the Gospel of Mark, wherein si Jesus, meron siyang tinanggalan ng demons, diba, dun sa community. Tapos, diba, after nung ma-cure yung tao, tapos aalis na si Jesus, May
Mm.
certain part dun sa story na yon na gustong sumama nung tao na na-cure, gusto niya sumama kay Kristo. Pero sinabi sa kanya ni Christ, no, stay with your family. I don't know if you remember that. And that has been in my mind. Sabi ko, bakit kaya gusto niyang sumama? And I realized, gusto niyang sumama kasi it doesn't mean just because wala na siyang demon, it doesn't mean tanggap na siya ng community.
Oo.
Maybe ayaw niyang magstay sa community niya kasi nakita niya si Kristo at yung kanyang mga disciple, yun are very accepting people. I would want to be in their company rather than stay in my community na hindi naman ako natatanggap. So para sa akin ay isa yung magandang storya when we talk about mental illness or people with disability na we have to do something sa community.
Now that you mentioned that, Ate Boots, it reminds me of the burden that we in the church carry.
Mm. Yes.
Si Marie is also a pastor, and ako mula nung nagkaroon ako ng condition, I started preaching on depression. I started preaching on grief and suffering na medyo bago sa pandinig ng congregation. Kasi ngayong congregation namin, sanay sa don't confess it. Kasi nga, life and death are in the power of the tongue. So if you start confessing depression, all the more that you will be depressed. May ganong klaseng theological worldview. And I started challenging that sa pulpit, saying na this is not something that we can deny or pray away.
Right.
It is something that we as a church need to confront dahil posibleng yung katabi natin sa congregation, nakangiti lang yan ngayon, pero deep inside is really struggling. Yung description kanina ni Ma'am Babeth na parang forcing yourself to smile along those lines. This is far more acute, I think, in the church. Kasi ang buhay ng Kristiyano ay masayang tunay.
Masayang tunay.
Masayang tunay. Parang bawal yung malungkot. Bawal ang nakasimango sa iglesia, sabi ng MC pag Sunday.
Correct. I may add. I heard one time, I won't say who, pero I heard an elder say na parang, nadidepress siya? Pwede ba yan sa Kristiyano? May ganyan ba sa Kristiyano? So actually, ang gusto kong tanungin, kanina nag-usap tayo, ang gusto kong tanungin, or I would rather maybe just throw this question to Miss Babeth, to Ate Babeth, or Tita Babeth. Can you imagine with us, so we're always talking about we need to be imaginative in our ministry, so can you imagine with us a church that is really open, a church that really journeys with people who struggle with mental health issues? Can you imagine with us, what does a church that really journeys with people na may ganitong suffering, how does this church look like? What are the ministries in this church? So ano po to, dahil artist kayo, let's imagine this ministry.
I will answer the question tangentially. In fact, I have another visual aid ready just for this particular question. I'm about to show you a painting by Cora Dandan Albano. She did this as her contribution to a fundraiser, a mental health association in Baguio. The title of her painting is, bigla ako nag-blank, nag-senior, Kansu Girl. There's a Japanese term, please correct me, Manang Melba, Kansugi or something. It means ending a broken piece, a broken bowl with lacquer, paste, and gold.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
In this painting, she shows a little girl mending a broken bowl.
Wow.
Right.
And then there's the night sky surrounding her. For me, the painting appealed to me because it's a metaphor for brokenness. Although you may feel broken inside, somehow you will be made whole, whether by your faith
Mm.
or by art or by your family or by your doctor. You will be made whole. And then when you are made whole, you become a more precious person. In Japan, the bowl that has been treated this way has a higher value.
Mhm.
I hope you get what I mean.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you for that, Babeth. Actually, sa Japan, it's a very precious metaphor. Yung
Mhm.
broken pottery.
Yes.
Pagka na-piece together, yung ganun. And actually, I think that is what Christianity is supposed to be. Na lahat tayo broken pieces eh. And then when we are able to be put together by the grace of God, then we are actually much, sabi nga ni Babette, we are much more precious. In the same way sa Japanese art, very precious yung mga ganong artifact that have been put together. May pangalan nga yun, kaya lang pareho kami ni Babette, senior na. So, hindi ko
it starts with a K.
Yes. Yes, with a
it,
K. Yes.
Kintsugi. Kintsugi, I think.
Kintsugi,
may,
kintsugi. Yes.
meron silang ganong term.
And during my low moments, I look at this painting and it has an empowering effect on me. It tells me, this too shall pass. You're gonna get over this, Babeth. Um, just like that broken bowl, you're gonna be whole again. Even if the cycle repeats itself, like, wala eh.
Yeah.
Yes. That should be the tenor of our ministry. We can be whole again. It's always okay to begin again. At totoo yan, kahit sa mga nasalanta ngayon, it's okay to begin again. Hindi ba, Ate Melba? We have one last question. Napaka-importante ng tanong na to. And this goes out to you, Ate Boots. Sabi ni Liana, thank you sa ating usapan daw po. Last question, what is the next step to take if it seems like the coping mechanisms don't seem to work? Ano po ang pwede nating gawin, Ate Boots? If it seems like this coping mechanisms that was tried doesn't seem to work. You're on mute, my dear ate.
Sorry, kasi merong siren. Sometimes sometimes we think that things are not working, no? But life goes on, katulad nga ang sabi ni Miss Babeth, no? And there would always be hope every time you wake up in the morning. The fact that we're alive, the fact that another day has been given to us, and that is a present from God. That's a gift. And we try to find meaning in each day that we wake up, kahit na mabigat siya. Dapat, dapat makita natin that there's always the possibility that something else could happen. Sabi mo, it could be a flicker of life, of light. It could be, a glimmer of light, but you have to believe that something can happen or something can change. The change may not be permanent. That, as we said, sometimes cycle nga ito or seasonal. Pero there would always be good times. There would be better times. There would be bad days. There would be worse days. But there would always be good days, no, in one's life. At ito regardless kung ikaw ay you have been diagnosed with a mental illness or not. Dapat meron kang ganung may belief na each day is created for possibilities, no? Oo. At yun yung din yung sinasabi natin na more than anything else, yung to deal with the stigma, and it would really help if people around us, of course the family usually is your source of support, but but also the bigger community. No, the bigger community must always be accepting, so that hope is possible, and you can always reimagine your life yourself. You can always write a new story, a new narrative of your life. Don't always go down the, I know that things are always hopeless, that there's no way out of it. There would always be something out, you could always do something about it.
Boots,
Yes.
Babeth, thank you. As we wrap up, yung general tenor na nakuha ko from our conversation is this, no? Hindi kinakailangan na na triumphalist optimism. Hindi yun na nakukuha ko eh. Diba? Yun nga eh. Again, malaki yung hugot ko dito. Kasi kinailangan maranasan ko bago ko ma-realize na, oh my, marami pala talagang hindi nakakaintindi nito, even within the church. So ang ganda lang nung statement ni Ate Boots na hope is possible even if the journey is punctuated with so many difficult moments. And yun din naman yung storyline ni Ma'am Babeth, hindi ba, no, tinanong natin siya kanina, does it get better with time? Ang sasabihin niya, cycle is sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 2 years. My Lord, 2 years, 2 weeks is already long. 2 years, another, just to go through this particular phase and that cycle. I think yung mga practical tips na na-pick up natin ito bago natin ipasa kay Ate Melba, marami tayong nakuha, brothers and sisters, na mga actionable items, if I may put it that way. Mahalaga yung point ng journeying is not getting ahead, not stepping back, but really just walking with that person. And ang isang direct application nun is about being comfortable in silence. Sa akin, very striking yun. I think I'm comfortable in silence, pero sometimes, di ba, pag hindi natapos nung kausap ko yung sentence, parang, okay, let me choose the word for you. Right? and so, thinking na I'm helping that person, but in reality, I'm not helping that person. So, very good reminder. And I think you can translate that dun sa level ng communities. The community has to be comfortable in silence. The community and the church has to be comfortable in silence. So tahimik itong batang ito, let him be. Right? Tahimik itong member na ito, let her be. And I think baka yun yung pwedeng maging ano tawag nito, yung reinforcement natin doon sa application natin, doon sa mga lessons na natutunan natin about journeying. Gaya ng sinabi ni Tim, a church that journeys with its members, tara, magsama-sama tayo mga parehong homeless in the ocean of injustice. And I think you can use that sentence to refer to the church's job or ministry of journeying with different kinds of people who go through different kinds of injustices. And finally, sa paglalagom kong ito, nang na-pick up ko po sa ating conversation kay Ma'am Babeth, kay Ate Boots, hindi lang yung personal yung finding solitude, solace in what gives you joy. That's very important, whether it's poetry or art or your own ministry, but also finding acceptance in the community. And yun po yung ating isa para sa akin na napakahalagang lesson take away ko from this, no? Acceptance in the middle of all this grief and suffering. Ate Melba, you wanna step in? Tapos i-replay mamaya yung poetry ni Miss Babeth.
I would like us to siguro listen uli doon sa unang, dalawa yung poem ni Babeth. Yung first one, I would like us to listen to that muna, and then I will siguro pick out some things from there, and then we will have yung last point niya maya-maya as a form of prayer, no, and closing.
Surviving the kitchen sink. I cannot and will not make a roll of morcon as good as my mother does, nor simmer soothingly a pot of mechado as lip-smacking as my husband does. But I can thoroughly wash tomatoes whose bottoms are as round as the half moons of my toes. Diced red apples as crisp as Baguio weather in December. Sliced bell peppers as green as the sheen of leaves after a rainfall. With a slightly steady hand, I can paint stones, pebbles, the lips of broken jars, but I cannot arrange them into an artful still life, for the landscaping skills I do not possess. Through a game of evasion, I have survived the sorrows of the kitchen sink. Let me not name them. Let me instead paint with this unsteady hand the contours of the vegetable basket's contents. For here, with my acquired vocabulary of acrylics, I have found a pocket of peace, discovered the strategies of strawberries, tasted the temperance of tomatoes, empathized with once chaste chayotes, now plucked from the vine and lain on a bulging pillow of bell peppers.
Is yung sense ni Babette ng very hard na surface ng reality. Yung slicing tomatoes, yung mga bell peppers, and yung uniqueness of what she has, no? Si, kanina si Boots was saying na hindi natin pwedeng yung ating experience, no, whether it's trauma or joy or whatever, cannot be like the others. Kasi may uniqueness yung human personality. So, I think it's important na yung kagaya ng kibabet, sabi niya she cannot cook, or like her husband or ganyan. Pero yung meron siyang very hard na touch sa reality. Yun yung when she's peeling vegetables, slicing tomatoes, yung concrete na nature. Siguro magandang aral yun for all of us that when we are tempted to have too much metaphysics, lalo na tayong mga Kristiyano, no? And we try to spiritualize everything. It's good to touch yung hard surface ng nature, whether it's just vegetables or whatever. Yung very concrete na reality of things around us. And that helps. Nature, it always helps, no? And then siguro yung sinasabi ni Butch then about walking with people. Na meron tayong, actually in our culture, meron tayong number one resource, yung kasama. Yung sinabi niya kanina. If we only have one person who just goes with us, walks with us, yun yung problema sa tingin ko. Can I have yung ni Elijah? Ng why people sink into despair. Kasi may feeling na mag-isa sila. May feeling na, I feel isolated. Now, I think it's good for us to understand na even the greatest prophets, kagaya ni Elijah, goes into despair. Yung 1 Kings 19 is a very good passage for Kasi akala natin nga, sabi nga nila may stigma, no? Akala natin yung mga great, no, messengers of God, lalo na si Elijah, kasi he's really a giant of a man, ano? Yung 1 Kings 18, yung contest dun sa Mount Carmel, na he pitted himself, you know, and God before yung 450 prophets ni Baal. And yung after that, he had to pray for rain, no? Para ma-resolve na yung drought. And then he actually ran, you know, about 17 miles, no? To just, you know, to the town center in overtake pa niya si Ahab. Now, this was a great exertion kasi people sometimes ask, bakit itong si Elijah, who was actually very brave, no? I mean, 450, ayaw mag-ano ito, 450, ayaw siya. 450 prophets ni Baal, ayaw mag-ano, no? Ay, masyadong nauna. Bakit siya ganon? Can I have yung great contest? Una-una is because he, you know, bakit siya natakot sa isang babae na kagaya ni Jezebel, no? He flees before this threat ni Jezebel. Sabi niya, you know, I will see to it na ikaw ay you get killed just like all these other prophets tomorrow. So he flees, no? Pagkatapos. And then, bakit ayaw? Bakit ganon? Kasi he is physically exhausted. I mean, he ran, no? Tapos he has all this killing ng 450 prophets. Even if may kasama siya ng mga Israel, you know, other Jews, the fact is that it was a physical exertion. And, you know, after yung contest na yun sa Mount Carmel, he was spiritually overstretched. Meron tinatawag na imperial overstretch, ano, yung mga colonial empires, kagaya ng Britain, nag-overstretch. Now, I think even spiritual giants, kagaya ni Elijah, you get overstretched. Simply lang din yun. Even great men and women of God, they get overstretched. And of course, as we have said kanina, he was feeling lonely and feeling isolated. So yung complaint niya sa Diyos, I am the only prophet left, no? Pinagpapatay na nila the rest of the prophets. And ako na lang ang natira, sabi niya. Now, I think yung feeling ng isolation, kagaya ng sinasabi nga nila, Boots, ano, it's very important that people do not feel alone, that do not feel isolated. Na-mention kanina ni si Anthony Bourdain, yung si Babeth. Well, actually, apparently, si Anthony Bourdain, meron siyang constant memory ng kanyang kabataan na he was always wanting to wait for the presence ng nanay niya.
Yeah.
Kaso yung para buksan yung pinto and then darating nanay niya, and he was always waiting in the dark, no, sa kanya. Kaso siguro nung time na yon, kahit na adult na siya, marami siyang kaibigan, marami siyang networks. He's a very successful writer, no? Nung time daw na yon, he had 50 calls doon sa kanyang mga kaibigan, lalo yung kanyang girlfriend. But there was nobody. At siguro bumalik sa kanya yung memory na he was always waiting in the dark for the mother to come. And she was not there. So, importante siguro for all of us, pastorally, no? Yung sinasabi ni Boots na we need to really know yung what it means to accompany people. Not so much to give advice, but to accompany people, to listen carefully, and have yung tinatawag na sacrament of the presence. Yung presence ng Diyos, at saka yung presence din natin. So, napaka-importante ito na We really accompany people. And I think yung kanina may sinabi si Babeth na yung ang hirap nung sa lockdown, meron tayong cultural trauma. Nawala tayo doon. We cannot go and hug our friends, our family. Biglang bibigay na lang sa'yo in a box yung mga ashes. Wala tayong mga rituals. And we have no friends to weep with us. By the way, importante yung, kahit si Jesus, no? Importante yung we weep with those, who are weeping. Importante yun for us as a community, that we weep with those who weep. And one of the traumas of our culture at this time, we cannot weep with our friends. We cannot weep with our family members who have lost loved ones. So, masakit yun masyado for a culture na so much of our ritual, so much of our religion has to do with accompanying the dead. Masakit yung fact na you were not there, no? Tapos binigay na lang sa'yo, ashes na, abo na. So, siguro yung ability to weep with those who weep. Kaya siguro it's a very healing thing to just weep. And yun ang problema ng friends ni Job eh. Nung first days na they just wept with Job, no? Sat in silence and wept with him. Very yun kay Job. Until nagsalita sila at kung ano nang pinagsasabi, nag-theologize na. And that's the trouble with those of us who like to just, yung sinasabi ni Boots na, I know what you're feeling. Mahirap yun eh, kasi unique ang human experience ng bawat isa. And then, siguro yung sinasabi na, ang reply ng, it's very interesting, dito sa 119, ang reply ng Diyos sa kay Elijah was not to rebuke him. It's not to say, aba, I mean, you have experienced greatly, yung aking spiritual resources. I have been with you, ganun. Hindi niya sinabi yun. And what he did was simply to give him food and drink. He sent this angel to give him food, to make him sleep. Hinayaan siya na for 1 or 2 days, hinayaan siya matulog lang at binibigyan ng pagkain. This is very important, yung kanina yung sinasabi ni Babeth na yung hard surface ng reality, importante yun eh. Hawak natin yun. And I think ang Diyos ganun din. Anong reply niya kay Elijah is just to what? Give him food, let him sleep. No? At pangalawa, yun na nga, yung pinabayaan niya na pumunta roon sa Mount Horeb, yung Mount Sinai. And iniisip ko yun, ano ibig sabihin nun na si Elijah went to Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai. I think it's because it's important to put people in a place of remembrance and where they can have memories and fresh revelation of what God is to them. Ako ay nasalantad, once again, pagkatapos ng Undoy, hindi ko alakalain ako ay magkakaroon ng ganitong experience uli ng disaster. And it was, I must say, kahit na ngayon, mukha pa akong tulala, I mean, I can talk. Sabi nga ni Babeth, it's possible to be a high-functioning manic depressive, no? Ako, I'm a high-functioning traumatized na because of the disaster. Pero I think what helps me these days is to always remember that the Lord loves me. Yun ang bottom line through all of this. Ang aking place of remembrance is always through many, many years. Yung aking previous Ondoy at saka ngayon, I know that God loves me. In fact, very concrete yung love na yun ngayon. Since last week, yung aking mga dinner and lunch, binibigay ng mga kaibigan. Parang si Elijah. Suddenly, somebody knocks, meron akong breakfast, meron akong lunch, meron akong dinner. Na, ang feeling ko parang si Elijah. You don't have to cook anything, But this is, God puts you in a place, in a very concrete place, where you remember His goodness and what He is to you. We will continue with 1 Kings 19 later. At siguro ito yung mga takeaway natin na we just have to once again review yung mga memories ng Diyos sa atin. Whatever it is na dinadaanan natin. Sometimes wonder kung paano yung ating mga kababayan na walang makain, walang masilungan, hindi kagaya ko na merong, lots of people and lots of places where I can evacuate, ganyan. Pag iniisip-isip ko yun, sabi ko, I hope, sabi ko ganyan, somehow, they feel na through all of this, God loves them. Merong remembrance na kagaya ng Mount Sinai. It was a place where God has forged a relationship and a covenant with Him. Yung relationship na yun hindi nawawala. Yung love na yun hindi nawawala. Ano man na dinaraanan natin. So, siguro we will stop there and I hope for all of us these days ma-renew sa ating mga memories yung reality na we can actually touch yung love ng Panginoon sa atin. Kung na-disaster man tayo, na Ulysses ulit tayo, wala tayong masilungan and everything. And through all of that, I think, yung sense na we listen to God and we listen to ourselves. When na yung sinabi ni Babeth, na we listen to our hearts, what God is saying. Nung ako'y natulala, makita ko itong once again, yung aking ground floor talagang swirling with water, tapos nagkukulay yung mga fridge, yung mga kung ano-ano. Parang natulala ako doon. And yet, alam ko na in my own heart, kahit na medyo natutrauma ako, if you listen to your own heart, you realize somehow God will rescue and God will love you through this. So yung we listen to others, we listen to the circumstances, but most of all, we listen to ourselves and to our hearts and what God is saying to us. Tanungin natin, Panginoon, ano po ang sinasabi niyo sa amin bilang individuals, but also as a church. Yung hindi na tayo nakagulapay dun sa napakaraming bagyo, sa lahat ng disasters, political man o natural, parang ang hirap umahon. Pero dapat tanungin natin, Lord, anong sinasabi ninyo? In what place are you bringing us so that we remember who you are? So, ganoon lang po. And I would like to thank and then we will have a last poem galing kay Babeth, no? So that we can close yung ating ngayon. Maganda yung poem na yun ni Babeth na sabi niya, we let our imagination, see yung kagaya ng wild geese, where we can be. Pwede bang natin yun as a last, Okay.
Okay. This is an attempt to translate the poem of Wild Geese. It's a very famous poem by the naturalist poet Mary Oliver. She has been called the Emily Dickinson of her generation, of the 20th, 21st century. Wild geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Ito naman ang tinangka kong isalin during one of my moments when I had a deep in mood. So, by translating something into another language, you're kind of exercising another muscle in your brain, and it helped me cope. Mga gansang ligaw, di mo kailangan maging mabait. Di mo kailangan lumakad ng paluhod ng isang daang milya sa disyerto, humihingi ng tawad. Kailangan mo lang napayagan ang mambot na hayop ng iyong katawan na mahalin ang gusto niyang mahalin. Sabihin mo sa akin ang iyong kawalan ng pasa at sasabihin ko sa iyo ang akin. Samantala, patuloy ang mundo. Samantala, ang araw at ang mga malinaw na bato ng ulan ay gumagalaw sa kalawakan, sa mga kapatagan at kalaliman ng mga puno, sa mga bundok at ilog. Samantala, ang mga gansang ligaw sa kaitaasan ng malinis na bughaw na hangin ay pauwi na muli. Kung sino ka man, gaano ka man kalungkot, inaalay ng mundo ang kanyang sarili sa iyong imahinasyon. Tinatawag ka tulad ng mga gansang ligaw, marahas at nakakagulat. Paulit-ulit na inaanunsyo ang iyong lugar sa pamilya ng mga bagay-bagay. Salamat.
Maraming salamat, Ma'am Babeth. Maraming salamat, Ate Boots. Maraming salamat, Ate Melba. Napakalalim at napakayaman ng ating episode na ito. Hindi ba, Marie?
Yes, totoo yan. And I hope that, the things that we have discussed, yung mga nasabi natin, also resonated with our viewers. Na okay lang kung may pinagdadaanan tayo. At yung hope, sabi nga natin, is not on the triumph, but on every little step that we make. Even when it means we have to begin. Even when it means we have to begin from zero. So, salamat, Ma'am Babeth. Nakakapagpalakas kayo ng loob. Ate Boots, maraming salamat. At sa mga kasama natin sa ISIP-ISAK, kita-kits ulit tayo next Thursday. Salamat, Ate Melba and Kuya Jahil. What a joy to be with you all.
God bless you po. Paalam po.
God bless you.